especially going as far away as Sheffield tonight. Hopefully. Pilgrimage, exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah, I want to say something in relation to these two evenings, which is there was a central event. That's partly why I decided that I wanted to talk a bit about suffering. So last Saturday we celebrated Triratna Day, and it's a very important event for us within this tradition, obviously. But yeah, 55 years ago, Sangha started a new movement in the West, and it was quite experimental. Yeah? There was no an attempt to reproduce anything like any of the previous schools that he knew in his time that he lived in Asia, particularly in India. And in a way, it's still quite experimental. Yeah? We keep that tradition of trying things out, and so we are still in that effort of trying to make the Dharma or try to translate the Dharma in terms that are relevant to all of us. Yeah? In living in cities, in the Western or Westernized world. So something very important for me when I think in that, in terms of that effort, is that sense of belonging to a lineage. Yeah. So that figure that Kusala Devi was referring at the beginning of the evening, that of Avalokiteshvara, that's a mythical representation of the order. Yeah, that the two of us and Chantika online tonight belong to another order members, not just in Nottingham, but around the world. And something very important to us is that we do support each other in our growth and enable each other to offer something to the world. Yeah? And I think that's a very deep commitment. Yeah? That's a very deep commitment that I'm going to say a bit more about the roots of that commitment, from the life of the Buddha. But yeah, we try to emulate our teachers. Yeah? We try to emulate the Buddha in particular. So I want to mention 3 events that are happening in the next 5 weeks, that are in that spirit of trying to emulate our teachers. Yeah? So Gareth mentioned the magic word. Gareth works a lot, so that's probably Freudian slip. The magic word of pilgrimage. Yeah, and the Buddha walked quite a bit. Yeah, the Buddha walked the north of India quite a bit. So he was always in movement. The Buddha says something about recommending his disciples to keep moving, yeah? Not to get stagnant, yeah? In one place, which is an interesting metaphor, yeah? to apply to our lives. But tomorrow we are quite literally going to walk in London. So we are going to be within our reach, a bit following Martin's example tonight. So we're going down to London to celebrate a very important event in the modern Buddhist world, which is the birth of Dr. Ambedkar. Yeah? So in India, they call it Ambedkar Jayanti. Yeah? And this is important because Dr. Ambedkar is a person who gave the push to a process that was already happening, but the last big push for the revival of Buddhism in India. Yeah? Something very important to remember is that Buddhism disappeared from India for many centuries. Yeah? And with Dr. Ambedkar and the people that preceded him and his heirs, Buddhism has come to life again in India. So tomorrow we are going down to Ambedkar House just to mark, to pay our respects to the memory of Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar came to London and studied here. He studied law and economics in London. Yeah, we are going to be there, paying our respects, and then we're going to move a bit around London. So we're going to the London Buddhist Centre, just to be part of that, very vibrant Sangha, and then moving around, probably going to see the Buddhist art collection in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we'll see if we have the energy to do something else or not at the end of the day. Yeah, so there is a still chance until tomorrow at 12 past 9. So if you want to join us, please don't hesitate. Just let us know that you want to come and join us. We can give you more details as well about that. Then something very important is, as well in that experience of moving, not getting stagnant in our practice. We do offer, used to be twice a year, but with the pandemic has changed a bit. So this year we're going to be offering 2 residential retreats. Last year we offered just 1, but there's a very special one happening at the end of the month. So we're going to the Peak District, to a place called Lockerbrook, very close to the Snake Pass, and we're going to have a bit of a long weekend starting on the 29th of April and finishing on Monday morning, Monday 2nd of May. And it's an opportunity for us to come together in that experience, as I said before, of supporting each other, in our growth and development, and enabling each other to discovering what is that we have to offer. So it's going to be a weekend on reflection, in a way, sort of a learning how to use our mind to help our practice. It might be that our experience with our mental states can be very disruptive sometimes. Too many distractions, too much mental activity. But our minds, our rational mind, our thinking mind is very important in the process of going deeper. In the process, for example, of understanding what the Buddha has to say. So please think about it. Consider it. It's a great opportunity. And it's one of those very precious moments, that there's a set of conditions that doesn't quite repeat itself. There is a bit of a cautionary tale around this, that we did a weekend retreat in Adhisthana at the beginning of 2020, and it was a very good Sangha retreat with many of us. And we came back to Nottingham on the Sunday afternoon, and on Tuesday of that week we were closed in the Nottingham Buddhist Centre because of the pandemic. And there were several months where people couldn't access this building, and there was a year and a half before we could go again on retreat. So if the thought crossed your mind of I'll do the next one, don't pay attention to that thought. This is your opportunity. You don't know what is waiting for you around the corner, or for us all. And then something very important that is happening soon. It's still a bit of time there, but it's a very important event for us in the Sangha, is Buddha Day, actually, the day that when we celebrate the enlightenment of the Buddha. So that's going to happen on the 15th of May. We're going to have a festival here in person. And in the evening of that Sunday the 15th of May, we're going to have 3 friends from the Sangha making a public commitment and becoming mitras. So they are Nina, Agnieszka, and Corey. So we want to welcome you all to join us. The program in the afternoon is going to be in person. It's going to be just for the people that come to the center. And in the evening, we're going to have a hybrid session. So we're going to have the camera as well there. Something very important that I want to add to all this is that it feels great, when we have so many people here in the shrine room, like tonight. I was a bit in disbelief when Zach asked me earlier how many people have booked, and I saw an 8 in the database. I thought there might be a mistake. It's been a while since we didn't have so many people here. But we were reviewing in the council here at the Nottingham Buddhist Centre, we were reviewing our policies on Monday, and we have decided to drop the booking system from next Wednesday, so a week from today. So if you want to come and join us on a Sangha night, you don't need to book any longer, just come along, just as we used to do before the pandemic. Yeah, and also there is no limit now for the number of people that we want to welcome back into the center. If you feel that you want to still, those of you at home or the people that might be watching this, we are not recording yet, are we? No. Yeah, we are. Okay, so the people that are watching this at home, if you feel like you want to wear a mask while you are here in person, feel free to do so as well. Yeah, so we'll be very respectful of that. Yeah, but it is in a way, taking advantage of the possibility of us being able to meet again in this way. Okay, so what we're going to be doing tonight is I want to round a bit what I started last week. So I don't think we're going to have groups tonight. And the reason for that is that I prepare a bit of recollection of stories from the life of the Buddha. Yeah? So I have 10 stories that I want to mention. Some of them a bit longer than others. But we'll see how my energy goes. But what I was thinking is that I really enjoy the mantra at the beginning of the evening. So I was very connected with that, a sense of compassion, evoking compassion in that way through the mantra. So if we have a bit of time at the end of the evening, maybe we just chant again the mantra and just sit, and stay with, be with whatever emerges in you through this exploration. So a bit of a recap. Last week we were looking at the first noble truth. So the Buddha talks about suffering in the formulation of the Four Noble Truths. That's the first one. So that's right at the center, the core of his teachings is suffering. I must say something important here, that not all Buddhist movements emphasize suffering as the main focus for the exploration of the Dharma. So from my own experience, for example, I know that there are Tibetan movements that focus more on the whole area of insubstantiality, selflessness. So I used to go in Mérida, in Venezuela, I used to go to groups of the Karma Kayu. I think it's the Diamond Way in English. And their theme was much more about insubstantiality. So that was out of the 3 lakshanas, if you remember, from your introductory courses, dukkha or insatisfactoriness, anicca or impermanence, and anatta or anatman, insubstantiality. And there is another movement that I did practice as well, going on long retreats, meditation retreats, called Goenka, S.N. Goenka. Vipassana is the name that is most known. And they emphasize a lot anicca, impermanence. That's the way that they explore the Dharma. But for us in Triratna, we look quite a bit into suffering, to dukkha. And it's good to understand really what the Buddha meant by that, what he was referring to by dukkha. So I'm just going to read again the formulation of the first noble truth that we were looking at last week. So the Buddha says, "Now this, monks, is the noble truth of dukkha. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the unbeloved is dukkha. Separation from the loved is dukkha. Not getting what is wanted is dukkha. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are dukkha." So the Buddha is very specific about what he means by this. And some of those are a bit puzzling. So why, I was talking a bit about that last week, why birth is dukkha. Well, there is a lot of pain in the process of being born, for the mother and for the child. But also, in the Buddhist tradition, the idea of becoming, taking on a new life, implies a lot of suffering. That's what is guaranteed. That there's going to be a lot of suffering. And the idea around this exploration is that I would like to see if we can find a way of transforming our relationship with suffering. So it might be, so one thing that we did last week is that we went into the groups, and the group that we had here in the shrine, we were remembering what was that brought us to the Buddhist center in first place. What was that first motivation? So it might be that what brought you to the Buddhist center was a very conscious experience of dukkha, or for other people wasn't that conscious, but maybe was a response, a wholehearted response to the ideal, but fueled by an earlier experience of dissatisfaction in your life. And I think that's very important to remember. Remember what is that brought you to the Buddhist center, even if that is not playing any role in your lives any longer. It's not, it's not actively affecting your lives any longer. But if we work intelligently with dukkha, we can make a lot of progress with that. It can be a very good motivator to practice dukkha. Obviously, dukkha can be very overwhelming as well. So in this area, we were talking a lot about compassion, and I think Kusaladevi is going to be exploring a bit more these areas of the positive, skillful emotion around the different possibilities, as it were, in human life or in life next week. But we were looking at karuna last week a bit, and compassion, and that idea that you need that emotional engagement with suffering, but also you need wisdom, you need understanding, you need an intelligent approach. So just emotion is not enough. So I mentioned this near enemy to compassion of sentimental pity. So feeling very strongly, but that all that feeling doesn't translate into action. So emotion needs to translate into action in our lives. But I want to say today a bit more about the Buddha himself. So because all this comes from him. So we are very lucky that 2.5 millennia ago, more or less, there was a man in what is today the north of India, sharing his understanding, sharing his discovery with people. And that process, when we think of the Buddha, we might think of something like that, something like a very clear image, of a perfect practitioner. Sometimes we use that expression, especially when we are reciting verses of praise to the Buddha. We talk about the perfection of his practice, the perfection of his knowledge, the perfection of his compassion. But as in everything, when you look a bit closer to the Buddha, to the life of the Buddha, you see that the Buddha was a complex human being. Something that I really like about the Buddha is that you can distinguish a personality with him. I was listening a while ago, I think a few years ago, before I moved to Nottingham, so probably this is 7 or 8 years ago. There was a podcast series on the history of India called Incarnations. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. And it was to celebrate, the Republic of India. And that series traced back the most remarkable individuals in the life of India, or the Indian civilization, as it were. And the series starts with the Buddha. And something that the series says is that the Buddha is the first recognizable individual that emerged, from India, which is very interesting. Something about it. So even though Buddhism wasn't written down, at least for the first 500 years of its development, it was passed on mostly by oral tradition. We can make sense of somebody very clearly a human that was engaging with people in many different ways. And what I say in the blog that we put around, that we sent around, is that the compassion of the Buddha was very practically minded. So there are many different examples of that in the life of the Buddha. For example, there is the famous case, I don't know if you have heard of this before, of the monk with dysentery. Yeah. And there is the Buddha, as I said before, walked quite a bit, and he usually went to visit different groups of monks. At that time, they weren't called monks. I don't know if they were called bhikkhus even. Yeah, I think those are more modern terms that we use. But the disciples of the Buddha at that time were called the Shakya Putras. Yeah? So Shakya is a clan that the Buddha belonged to, and Putra, the word Putra means sons and daughters. Yeah? The sons and daughters of the Shakyan sage. Yeah? And there were sort of groups of these disciples practicing together, you know, different parts. And the Buddha, in one of these rounds, walking, find this bhikkhu, this practitioner, prostrated in his own feces, yeah, in his own excrement. And he asks, he establishes a conversation with this person, and you know what happened, and what he replies to the Buddha is, "I'm not of any use any longer to my brothers, so they have left me here." So the Buddha, with Ananda, with his companion, cleans this person, this monk, and finds a place where this person can rest and receive the proper treatment. And then he goes and talks with the bhikkhus, yeah? And they were very honest. You know, the Buddha asked, why did you do that? And they say the same. You know, that bhikkhu, that brother, is no longer of use to us. It's no longer supportive to us. Yeah? So the Buddha exhorted them very strongly to look after each other with compassion, with care, because they have left behind mother and father, family, relatives. You know, they don't have that security any longer. So that's just one case. The compassion of the Buddha wasn't always, you know, that kind of compassion, very patient and very tolerant. Apparently the Buddha was quite intolerant towards lies. Yeah? So that was something that the Buddha was very, very strong. And there is a very, very strong, this is, I don't know if you know more or less about the pantheon of Buddhist figures, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Avalokiteshvara is one of those Bodhisattvas that we talk about. But there is one called Vajrapani that is holding a Vajra and is full of energy. Usually the ruffled form of Vajrapani is it has a very big blue body surrounded by flames. Yeah? So it's a lot of energy there. And there is a story of the Buddha being in a conversation with somebody, and this person is trying to humiliate the Buddha. Yeah? This is based on all the old tradition in India that is still persisting today, you know, of clans and caste. So somebody who thought that they were of a nobler birth than the Buddha. Yeah? And he's trying to humiliate the Buddha, but he's lying about his own origin. Yeah? This story is getting a bit convoluted. Yeah? Apparently, the origins of the clan of this person were from a slave, from the clan of the Buddha as well, but he was hiding that information. But the Buddha gets into a point of this interaction that he's asking, you know, a question about, is this true or not? And the person is denying it. So in the records, you usually get the Buddha asking a question. He gets asked a question 3 times before he answers, or he asks a question 3 times before he takes action. Yeah? And in this question, he's confronting this person with the truth. And this person is denying it once, denied it twice. And at the 3rd time, the Buddha apparently is very ruffled in his approach. And according to the story, Vajrapani, this bodhisattva, this emanation, emerges from behind the Buddha with the Vajra and just about to throw the vajra to the head of this person. Yeah? And the Buddha apparently is very strong and says, I'm going to ask you for a third time, if you lie again, your head is going to be shattered in pieces, and something very strong. And apparently something was communicated from that energy to this other person. Yeah? So the Buddha could be the Buddha was a warrior. He came from the caste of the warriors. Yeah? So he could be quite strong if he wanted to. Yeah? The Buddha apparently knew very well how to treat kings, yeah? How to talk to power. He had some disciples that were kings. Yeah? He was very skilled in that art of talking to power. But the story that I want to dwell a bit more in tonight is a story that is very dear to me. It's a story that I found in my very early involvement with Buddhism. And it's a story that I have kept reflecting on over the years, and I find more and more meaning in it. Yeah? And it's a story of Kisa Gotami that you probably have heard of. So this is probably when at some point in the Buddha's spreading the truth of the Dharma process that he's well known already, yeah? And he goes to villages. And there is a story of this woman, this very young woman but apparently her name was Gotami, yeah? But she got this, how you call that in English? Like when it's a word, nickname, yeah, thank you. So she got this name, Kisa. Yeah? And Kisa means skinny. Yeah? So it was a pejorative nickname. It was she came from a very poor family. I can imagine, knowing what I know of India, I can imagine the whole dynamic with the caste. So probably from a low caste as well. And in India at the time, it still happens today actually, but at the time especially, for women to get married, her family needs to give a dowry to the potential husband. So this family was very poor; they couldn't afford a very big dowry for her. Yeah. And also, it's very sad, but at that time also women were considered property. Yeah. So she was given to a man who mistreated her and his family as well. So she was humiliated, humiliated probably by her family as well, not just by her husband, by the family of her husband, but her own family. The story says that her in-laws behaved harshly towards her and made her work very hard, treating her as little more than an unpaid servant. So basically a slave. Yeah, we're talking of that. I'm a bit ashamed to say, that I seen this happening in India. Not probably at that extreme, but I seen the daughters-in-law, in a household moving to the family of their husband and being treated as servants in the household. But then, as it happens, she became a mother. She had a child. And that changed her life completely. So by becoming a mother, she suddenly was somebody in the eyes of her husband and in the eyes of the family of her husband, and probably society in general at that time. And she was very happy. She was very happy. That was the joy of her life, becoming a mother. It's a very, very special thing, but also represented for her that recognition as a human being. But unfortunately, the child got ill and died. And she was completely overwhelmed by grief at that point. The story says that she lost her mind, basically. She couldn't accept the fact that her child had died, and she was clinging to the body, to the corpse of this baby, clutching it against her own body. And she was just started to wander around begging for medicine, begging for somebody to help her. And the story says a bit about, the people treated her very, with a lot of cruelty. Some people, not everybody, but some people were a bit more trying to make her understand that her child had died. By the way, the life of a woman in India, still today, there is still, there's a lot, so many documents that talk about that, but a woman that is a widow, or a woman that doesn't have either a son or a husband, can be very, very, very difficult. It can be hell sometimes. So somebody tells her that the Buddha is around in the village, that she should go and see the Buddha. So the Buddha had already a bit of a reputation of being able to do something. The story says that the Buddha had all sorts of mysterious powers. So perhaps he could help her. And I love this interaction, of the Buddha. So she comes to the Buddha and she asks for medicine. And apparently what she asked the Buddha is to awake her child, because she believed that the child is asleep, is deeply asleep, and she doesn't know how to awake him. And the Buddha says, I love this bit. The Buddha says, yes, I can help you. So the Buddha is right there with her. He's not trying to convince her that her child had died. He's not saying, there is a noble truth of death, and death is suffering, and da. He's not saying that. What he says is, yes, I can help you. But before I can make the medicine, you must bring me one thing. I will need a mustard seed. Mustard seed is probably the most common spice in India, and she's overjoyed. She said, well, it's very simple. He's going to work a miracle with this little thing. But he said, but there is just one condition, though. The seed must come from a household in which no one has died. So she goes. She knocks at the doors of the different houses in the village and asks for the mustard seed. And everybody is very willing to give her, the mustard seed. But then she asks the question, has anybody died in the house? And everybody starts sharing with her their story of losing somebody dear to them. So that's one of the things that the Buddha says. Being separated from that is love, is dukkha. So she gets in connection with the dukkha, the suffering of others. And that's a miracle of the mustard seed. So the Buddha wasn't patronizing. The Buddha wasn't trying to tell her, from his wisdom, how things were. What the Buddha gave her was a power to find the truth by herself. And I think that's very significant, that moment of the Buddha understanding that. The most I think about this episode, I think the Buddha was very aware of who Kisa Gotami was, that she came from a very poor family, she was destitute, that she has lost the only element in her life that made her look like a person in the eyes of the society that she belonged to. So I think the empathy of the Buddha wasn't just about a mother losing her child, as difficult and terrible as that is, but it's the awareness of all that was around that loss in her life. And she suddenly awakens to the reality. And what I find beautiful about this story is that she herself finds the strength to let go of her child. That's amazing for me. That's more powerful for me than the Buddha reviving, the child, I think. the fact that somebody can transform their consciousness in that way, that you can change and find the strength to look at life from a different angle, from a different perspective. There are many different versions about the story of Kisa Gotami, how it goes, but eventually she became a disciple of the Buddha, and she became an enlightened being as well. And there is a very, very beautiful story about her encountering Mara later on in life. So then Mara, the evil one, this is Kisa Gotami as a nun, let's say, as a bhikkhuni, one of these Shakyaputras, wanting to arouse fear, horripilation, and terror in her, wanting to make her fall away from concentration, approach her and address her in verse. Why, with your son's kill, do you sit all alone, your face in tears, all alone immersed in the midst of the forest? Are you looking for a man? And she replies, I gotten past the killing of sons, have made that the end of my search for men. So, and this is very powerful. Yeah? Remember that thing about men and sons were a way of being somebody in this society. Yeah? I don't grieve, I don't weep. I'm not afraid of you, my friend. It's everywhere destroyed the light. The mass of darkness is shattered, having defeated the army of death, free of fermentations, I dwell. So it's a song of freedom, what she sings. I think that's beautiful, personally. So Mara is an important figure in this area of looking at suffering. So if you remember, Mara was there the night of enlightenment. He was trying to obstruct the transformation of Siddhartha or Gautama into the Buddha. So I wanted to look at that a bit more deeply, and then I go into some of the stories from the Buddha himself. So the word Mara, it means killing, destroying, bringing death and pestilence. Mara is the principle of destruction. And sometimes this principle is personified. So in these dialogues, for example, he appears like an entity. But there are 4 kinds of Maras, according to the tradition. So there is Machu Mara, Kanda Mara, Kilesa Mara, and Devaputa Mara. So very briefly, just to illustrate this point, Machu Mara is the notion that death exists, that things have an end. So we know that death is somewhere there awaiting. We all know that as an abstraction, as an idea. That's Machu Mara. Kanda Mara, though, is the experience of death. So the experience of, as in the first noble truth that I just read again, it says the 5 clinging aggregates are dukkha. So in Buddhism, the experience of being somebody has 5 clinging aggregates or skandhas. So Kanda Mara or Skandha Mara is the experience of death. It's the experience of things having an end in our lives. Relationships finish. We lose people that we love. We lose opportunities, we lose careers, we lose many things. So that experience, that's Kanda Mara, that we know in our own flesh, as it were, and bones, that things finish. There is Kilesa Mara, which has to do with the roots of unskillfulness. So if you remember, we introduced you in the introductory course, we talk about the wheel of life. And you remember that there were 3 animals at the root. in the center of the wheel of life. Yeah, so the pig, the snake, and the rooster. Yeah, and those are craving, delusion, and hatred. Yeah? And those are these kilesa maras, these contaminations of our actions. Yeah? So this unskillfulness. There is actually something very interesting here. There are two more. So we have craving, aversion, ignorance, but also conceit and distraction are kilesa maras. Yeah? So in a way that becomes an obstacle for us to act more skillfully in the world. Yeah? And then there's Deva Putamara, which is the devil. Yeah, there's this character that appears and that is usually confronting the Buddha. I just want to give you some examples of this, in the life of the Buddha. And one very, very straightforward one is as a conversation between the Buddha and this Deva Putamara. Yeah? And what I like about this story is that the Buddha is ill. So if you remember, when the Buddha left the palace, or the Buddha to be left the palace, that was preceded by him seeing illness, old age, and death for the first time. Yeah? And this is a very important point that I want to make. Yeah? You might think that the Buddha left behind those things. So by practicing the Dharma, we are escaping illness, we are escaping old age, and we are escaping death. Yeah? But that's not the case. Even the Buddha, an enlightened being, got ill, got old, and died. Yeah? So we are going to share that with him. Yeah? And this is a story of the Buddha who had been pierced in one of his foot by a stone silver. So probably a very sharp stone. Yeah? And I think, by reading the story, I think he was infected. Probably he was infected. Yeah. So the Buddha had this excruciating pain. The bodily feelings developed within him. The bodily feelings that developed within him were painful, fierce, sharp, rocking, repellent, disagreeable. But he endured them mindful, alert, and unperturbed. Having had his outer robe folded in four and lay out, he lay down on his right side in the lion's posture, with one foot placed on top of the other. Yeah. So he's there, prostrated, in pain, yeah, trying to be mindful. Yeah. And then Mara appears. And he has this little encounter with Mara. And what Mara says is basically, what are you doing there, lying? Lazy. So he says, are you lying there in a stupor or drunk on poetry? Are your goals so very few, all alone in a secluded lodging? What is this dreamer, this sleepy face? So the Mara is tempting him, in a way. Why you are not striving with your practice? Why are you there prostrated, lazy? And the Buddha gives a very beautiful reply. I'm not going to read it, it's a bit long. But I think when I read these kind of things, I think this Devaputa Mara is a kind of personification of something in the mind of the Buddha. Yeah? So this is my take on this. I think it's a personification of doubt. Yeah? It's a personification probably of guilt, a certain sense of guilt. Yeah? The Buddha apparently was also very proud. Yeah? So I'm portraying a picture of the Buddha that maybe not many of you have gone across yet. But he probably held himself in great esteem. Yeah, he was very aware that he was exemplifying things for others. Yeah, and this is almost like Mara is telling him, you are letting a lot of people down. Yeah, by being there prostrated. Yeah? So the Buddha responds, in a very beautiful way on how he is free from that that desire to go back, to go low. So in a way, sort of a very positive pride. It's not the pride, the conceit that comes from status or owning something. It's more about the positive pride of being free. Okay, let's see what we have time for them. How are we doing? How is the energy in the room? Is okay? Yeah? Yeah, I want to talk about a couple of episodes in the life of the Buddha where the Buddha got a bit fed up with people, yeah? Especially practitioners. So there's a very famous episode of the quarreling monks of Kosambi. So very briefly, just for those of you who haven't heard the story, there's these two teachers in this community of followers of the Buddha. One is an expert on doctrine, and the other is an expert on discipline. Yeah. And as it happens, they coincide in going to the latrines, yeah, together. And they have, I suppose this happened at a point in the career of the Buddha when the Sangha of his followers was a bit established already. So they have some facilities built for them, and there were large numbers of them gathering. Yeah. So the doctrine teacher does something that is not according to the rules, to the Vinaya, to the discipline. So apparently something very simple, like putting a bucket of water in the wrong place after finishing cleaning himself. So the discipline teacher comes, sees that, and points that out to the doctrine teacher. And the doctrine teacher apologizes and says, I hope this is okay, there's not going to have any implications. And the discipline teacher says, yeah, no, of course, no problem. But what he does next, the discipline teacher, is goes and talks to his disciples and says, that doctrine teacher, when he was in the latrine, he put the water bucket in the wrong place. And gossip starts in that side, in that wing of the Sangha. As it happens as well, some of the disciples of the discipline teacher meet disciples of the doctrine teacher and start saying, oh, your teacher is so mindful. Your teacher was in the latrine and did those wrong. And these get very defensive of that. And then they start to quarreling. Yeah? So the story says that they had these two parties had taken to quarreling and brawling and were deeply at odds, stabbing each other with their words. Some of the translation says stabbing each other with verbal daggers. Yeah? So very, very cruel, I imagine, speech, slandering each other. They are different teachers. So the Buddha is called to intervene in this quarrel. And the interesting thing here is that the Buddha is not enough. These two factions are so enthralled, so into the spirit of fighting and being the triumphant side of the story, that they dismiss the Buddha. And one of them says to the Buddha, the responsibility for these quarrels is ours alone. So please go, we can resolve this between ourselves. And apparently the Buddha gets very frustrated with this, and he decides to go on his own to the forest. This is a very important story because I think the Buddha was, if you remember this story, I don't know if you probably, we tend to mention this in the introductory courses, but there's a moment straight after enlightenment that the Buddha has a bit of doubt if communicating the Dharma or not. And something that he thinks is that trying to communicate this truth is going to be troublesome for me, because people are not going to understand it. So I can imagine that for the Buddha, even if he was moved by this, this very strong emotion of compassion, of wanting to help others, there were probably moments of doubt, and this definitely was one of them, of feeling like, okay, this is enough. I go on my own. I'm just going to focus on my practice. The story is very beautiful in terms of what happened to the Buddha next. That he encounters this bull elephant in the forest. I learned a word that I didn't know before. It's called hem up. The Buddha is hem up, by these quarreling monks. Apparently the bull elephant, have been hemmed up by other elephants as well. So these two kind of individuals from their different herds find each other, and they are very happy, with each other's company. Eventually, the Buddha, other things happen. I'm not going to go into detail with that, but eventually the Buddha comes back, and the thing, this is very, very interesting, because the thing that makes these monks call back the Buddha is that the villagers stop giving them alms, because their quarrels are creating so much chaos in the vicinity. And the Buddha comes back and he resolves the quarrel, but he says to them very strongly, while you were quarreling, while you were in conflict, you weren't my disciples. So you need to go and apologize with everybody, because if you receive alms during that period, you did it on a false pretense. And apparently the Buddha never came back to this region again. So he left that. There is also another episode where the Buddha decides, apparently the Buddha is not very tolerant with this kind of, there's a very big party of monks that are very noisy. And the Buddha tries again to remind them of the practice, what the practice is about, and they don't listen to him. So this is probably a bit later, and the Buddha actually apparently decides to quit the Sangha. The record says that the Buddha is asked to come back to lead the bhikkhus, the Sangha of the bhikkhus, not just this group of monks. And there's in this story, the two main disciples of the Buddha, Shariputra and Moggallana, appear. Apparently they have taken over. They are leading the Sangha at that point. So I'm just aware of time, and I really want to go into this. There's two very, very strong moments in the life of the Buddha. One is the death of these two disciples, Shariputra and Moggallana, which were in a way, they were sharing the leadership of the Sangha with him. And the Buddha, I think the Buddha is feeling something. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the Buddha is going through at that point, but he says something about when he hears of the Buddha. Actually, the death of Shariputra and Moggallana is important as well, because Shariputra died very peacefully, but Moggallana is killed violently by a rival faction of practitioners of, at the time of the Buddha. And when the Buddha hears the story, he says to the bhikkhus gather, bhikkhus, this assembly appears to me empty now that Shariputra and Moggallana have attained final nibbana. This assembly was not empty for me earlier, and I had no concern for whatever quarter Shariputra and Moggallana were dwelling in. Yeah. I feel that actually. I feel the Buddha talking about feeling empty. Yeah. It's a gathering of bhikkhus. Yeah. But these two friends, it's not just disciples, but friends are not there any longer. There is another episode, which is a very, very difficult one, because the Buddha unintentionally help was a factor in the demise of his own people, the Shakyans. So he got embroiled in a coup d'etat, basically, against a very powerful king. And the person who took over had a long-standing, was holding a long-standing grudge against the Shakyans, and they went there and they apparently finished, the Shakyan civilization. And the Buddha was impotent, seeing that happening. And the story says that the Buddha went again. This is not the story in in the Pali Canon, but the story in the Chinese Canon, that the Buddha went again to the forest on his own. Yeah. In the Chinese Canon, apparently, it's very clear that the Buddha is mourning his own people. Yeah. But he's affected by this. This story in the Pali Canon actually appears in the last discourse in the Mahaparinirvana Sutta, which relates the death of the Buddha. Yeah. So it's one of the events that happened just before the Buddha died. And the Buddha, there's a level of frustration as well, that I read. I'm portraying a very human Buddha here, but made of it what you wish. Yeah? There's a point, the Buddha is already very old. Apparently the Buddha lived until he was 80 years old. Yeah? And there's a point when Ananda, his cousin and attendant, says to him, "It's amazing, Lord, it's astounding how the Blessed One's complexion is no longer so clear and bright. His limbs are flabby and wrinkled, his back bent forward. There is a discernible change in his faculties, the faculty of the eye, the faculty of the ear, the faculty of the nose, the faculty of the tongue, the faculty of the body." Yeah. And the Buddha replies, that's the way it is, Ananda. And then, he is the usual very, very wise words about understanding the fact of impermanence, understanding the fact of old age. But then he recites in verse, "I spit on you, old age." Yeah. I feel like that's very strong. "I spit on you, old age. Old age that makes for ugliness. The bodily image, so charming, is trampled by old age. Even those who live to 100 are headed, all to an end in death, which spares no one, which tramples all." Yeah. And the reason I'm reading this is that I feel closer to the Buddha, when I find these episodes in his life. Because I struggle with suffering in my own life. Yeah. I struggle with pain, emotional pain, physical pain. I struggle with illness. Yeah. I'm aware that I'm aging more and more. Yeah. So all those elements are part of my life, and I need to bring them into my practice and befriend them in many ways. So I borrow a lot of inspiration of seeing the Buddha, holding those two streams of his own experience, and still being there, being true to the choice that he made of communicating his truth. So I think I'm going to finish that, and we have about 6 or 5 minutes. And I think a good way of finishing will be just by chanting the Avalokiteshvara mantra again. Se la dediquen guidance.
Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Thank you very much, Arivachan, for a beautiful, rich evening with all those stories from the Buddha weaved together really beautifully. Thank you. So bye to everyone online.